Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into something that's probably given you a headache at least once, the incredibly complex, deeply frustrating, but absolutely vital mechanics of Illinois property taxes. For years, this system has felt like an impenetrable black box dictating the financial health of our communities. Well, let's finally unlock it.
To really get why this matters so much, just look at this one staggering number, 1.83%. That is the highest effective property tax rate in the entire country, and yep, it belongs to Illinois. When you compare this annual burden to the rest of the nation, it becomes immediately clear why property taxes just completely dominate local political debates.
But here's where it gets genuinely alarming. That burden, it is not shared equally, not even close. In some South suburban Cook County communities, we're talking places like Fort Heights, Phoenix, Riverdale, and Harvey, total rates actually exceed a punishing 20%. And these rates aren't funding lavish public services, right? They're really the symptom of a collapsing tax base, where the massive financial weight just gets shifted onto a shrinking pool of taxpayers.
So naturally, civic watchdogs are sounding the alarm. Take Joe Ferguson, president of the Civic Federation. He bluntly points out that this system is failing the exact people it's supposed to serve. He argues that decades of lawmakers just slapping Band-Aids over structural flaws have basically created this regressive maze that pushes families right to the financial brink.
Okay, so what's driving these massive rates? Well, it mostly comes down to education. Unlike states where the government shoulders the bulk of school funding, Illinois relies heavily on local property taxpayers. Because of this, roughly 60% of your local tax dollars are funneled directly into neighborhood schools, leaving the rest to be split among fire, police, and parks. 100% stays local.
Part 1. The machinery. Following the Smiths' tax bill.
Let's actually see how this machinery works in real life. We're going to follow a fictitious couple, let's call them John and Jane Smith, who just bought a $250,000 home. Their property enters a 2-year cycle, starting with year 1, assessment and budgeting. First, the assessor estimates their home's market value. Second, the Smiths receive a notice to review and maybe appeal it. Third, the state applies an equalization multiplier to make sure assessments are uniform across counties. And finally comes the levy. That's when local taxing bodies set their operating budgets and submit their actual cash requests.
But hold on. Before we do the Smiths math, we really need to establish a massive structural difference. In most of Illinois, non-farm property is assessed at 1/3 of its fair market value. But Cook County kind of plays by its own rules. There, residential properties are assessed at just 10%, while commercial properties are hit at 25%. It's a really vital distinction that dramatically shifts the math depending entirely on your zip code.
All right, moving into year 2, which is where the bill actually comes due. Step 5 is the tax extension. This is the moment the county clerk takes all the money requested by local districts, the levy, and divides it by the total assessed value of the area to generate your specific tax rate. Finally, step 6 is collection. The county applies any exemptions, drops the bill in the mail, and distributes your money back to the community.
So let's look at how the algebra plays out for the Smiths, assuming they live outside Cook County. We start with their $250,000 market value. The assessor applies that 33.33% assessment level, which brings it down to $83,325. We subtract a $6,000 general homestead exemption, leaving a net taxable value of $77,325. Multiply that by their local 7% tax rate, and their final bill? Exactly $5,412.75. Part 2. The Toolkit. Lowering your tax bill and systemic reforms.
So, now that we know how the bill is calculated, how can you actually fight it? Well, homeowners can significantly shrink their taxable value using exemptions, if they know to apply for them. The general homestead exemption alone saves the Smiths $420 every single year. Later in life, the senior citizens assessment freeze can literally lock in their home's assessed value against inflation. There are also vital exemptions specifically protecting military veterans and persons with disabilities.
But what if you just fundamentally disagree with the assessor's baseline value of your home? Legal experts actually outline a pretty clear 3-step counterattack. First, scrutinize your assessment notice and pull comparable sales data in your neighborhood. Second, file a formal appeal with your local board of review. And if you're still unsatisfied, step 3 is taking it to the state-level property tax appeal board, or hiring an attorney to navigate the fight for you.
Even with these tools, we're seeing a really concerning trend. In Cook County alone, nearly $1 billion, yes, billion with a B, went completely unpaid in 2023.
In towns like Ford Heights, a mere 31% of taxes were collected. It begs a massive question. Why are collection rates absolutely plummeting across the state?
The data reveals this vicious downward spiral. Remember, property taxes are based on unrealized home values, not the actual cash you have in your pocket. When assessments spike, tax bills rise, even if a family's income hasn't budged an inch. When those bills become mathematically unaffordable, residents simply stop paying. And that unpaid burden? It gets shifted right onto the neighbors, forcing rates even higher for whoever is left.
This kind of systemic spiral obviously demands systemic reform. Given the severity of the crisis, you might be asking, hey, whatever happened to that highly publicized 2019 legislative task force? I mean, this was a group specifically mandated to solve this exact crisis once and for all.
To report on this objectively, that 88-member task force launched with some super ambitious goals, namely consolidating Illinois' 6,000-plus units of local government, which is the highest number in the nation. But a draft report in January 2020 stalled out over deep partisan divides regarding pension limits and tax freezes. Shortly after, as the pandemic hit, the task force just quietly dissolved. A final consensus document was never even voted on.
So without a massive overhaul, the state has mostly relied on piecemeal interventions over the years. You've got tax caps, known as PTELL, which restrict a local district's annual levy increase to 5% or inflation. You have 2017's evidence-based funding, designed to pump more state money into underfunded schools to ease the local tax burden. And more recently, a 2023 law slashed the punitive penalty on delinquent taxes in Cook County from 18% down to 9%, a targeted move aimed at keeping struggling families in their homes.
Ultimately, as you look at your own tax bill and start to really understand the machinery behind it, we want to leave you with this final thought. What will it actually take for stakeholders to abandon decades of patchwork compromises? Can we ever tear this down and build a truly transparent property tax system from scratch? Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.